Hi, everyone.
Hello again.
We're in the Pure Worship book. Last time we had a little delay from the text, so now we're going to go back to the text.
What page is it?
This is on page 59 under the subtitle Moral Uncleanness, Obscene Conduct in Your Midst. And so they've skipped from 8 to chapter 22. So they've suggested reading Ezekiel 22, 3 to 12.
All right, I'm going to read from the beginning. I don't know why they skipped the first two verses. Maybe that will become evident. Here's Ezekiel 22, verses 1 to 12 from the New World Translation. And the word of Jehovah again came to me, saying, As for you, son of man, are you prepared to pronounce judgment on the blood-guilty city, and to make known to her all her detestable things? You are to say, this is what the sovereign Lord Jehovah says. O city that sheds blood within herself, whose time is coming, who makes disgusting idols to defile herself, your bloodshed has made you guilty, and your disgusting idols have made you unclean. You have hastened the end of your days, and the end of your years has come. That is why I will make you an object of reproach to the nations, and an object of mockery to all the lands. The lands nearby and those far away from you will mock you, you whose name is unclean and who are filled with turmoil. Look, each of the chieftains of Israel among you uses his authority to shed blood. Within you they treat their father and mother with contempt. They defraud the foreign resident, and they mistreat the fatherless child and the widow. My holy places you despise, and my Sabbaths you profane. Within you are slanderers, intent on shedding blood. Within you they eat sacrifices on the mountains and carry on obscene conduct in your midst. Within you they dishonor their father's bed, and they violate a woman unclean in her menstruation. Within you one man acts detestably with his neighbor's wife, another defiles his own daughter-in-law with obscene conduct, and another violates his sister, daughter of his own father. Within you they take a bribe to shed blood. You lend on interest or for a profit, and you extort money from your neighbors. Yes, you have entirely forgotten me, declares the sovereign Lord Jehovah.
So then in their comments, we'll do some of their comments. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but just the things that triggered us. So in paragraph 20, they said, religious leaders, in particular, the clergy of Christendom, have blessed the wars of the nations that have caused the loss of countless of millions of lives. And then they also had said, surely Jehovah would say to Christendom what he said to apostate Judah, you have entirely forgotten me. They use that phrase a few times in these paragraphs. They also said, what though did Jehovah do about his unfaithful people? At the conclusion of Ezekiel's temple tour, Jehovah plainly told his prophet, I will act in rage. We want to know what action Jehovah took toward unfaithful Judah, for a similar judgment will be executed on this wicked world.
Well, what's that judgment? For the sake, if you're going to make a comparison between Judah then and Christendom now, surely the similar judgment would be more like the same judgment, because that God is just, right? He's always fair. Well, you say that judgment on Christendom is going to be annihilation. But what's the judgment on Judah?
Well, they're still here. So Israel is still here. So that tells you it wasn't utter destruction for the people.
Israel's still here today.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so he's been really merciful.
So what he did with them was to scatter them. Just like he'd already scattered the other tribes. Now he's going to scatter Judah. I
think maybe then we should add that one verse that you were struck 15. By, verse 15. Yeah. Why did they leave verse 15 out? Listen to what verse 15 says. For it will not be a testing.
Are you in the right place?
No, I'm not. Sorry. Next page.
22.
The problem is I'm going from Bible to Bible here and seeing different place on the page. He says, I will scatter you among the nations and disperse you through the countries, and I will consume your uncleanness out of you.
Yeah.
So the prophecy, like you just said, is we're talking about a cleansing here. We're not talking about annihilation and an eternal judgment, which you say Christendom and all the people in the world who reject you face right now.
I mean, this is a message to his people.
From one of them.
He sends a prophet of his people to his people.
Yeah.
And he tells them, this is what's going to happen. They are getting some judgment, some discipline, but it's not annihilation.
That's right. So it's not that God is, his rage, I think the word is, right? In that last paragraph. His rage doesn't play itself out in annihilation. It plays itself out in restorative judgment. Mm-hmm. Restoration is in view, right? Yeah. And that happens after 70 years for Judah even.
So, yeah, that's right. But I think the other thing that bothered me in the presentation here last time, we showed you the two pictures, so this is Christendom, apparently. It's all of them. That's what you get from this, is you paint them all with the same brush. You don't talk about those that are opposed to the things that you're opposed to.
Sighing and groaning over the detestable things?
Yeah. You have them all being declared guilty because some are doing wrong. Mm-hmm. Was that true in his judgment of his people? Does he just cast them all off, every single person?
Well, it's not, again, we've said this before, it's not a judgment on religion, it's a judgment on people.
Yeah.
God is interested in restoring those people if possible. Mm-hmm. And he preserves the ones who are faithful. So you have it that everybody in Christendom is blood guilty, and therefore somehow the guilt of some transfers to everybody else. Yeah. And you start with blood guilt. So we'll get to that in a second. But I think we want to make the point that they do this habitually. Mm-hmm. It is, if you're in Christendom, you are somehow guilty for everything Christendom does.
Yeah.
But if you're in Jehovah's Witnesses, you're not guilty for everything Jehovah's Witnesses do.
No.
Or the organization does.
Yeah. So, are we to believe that none of these sins that are described in Ezekiel have ever or are still going on in the organization?
Right.
Among any of the people?
Well, I think the point you just made washes into this, these generalizations here about people, what they did, and we'll get to that in a second. But you've already got the point, you've made the point that Christendom is being judged according to you for God, because God is just. God's mercifulness is not being transferable. That is, the good that Ezekiel does, or the good that Jeremiah does, or the good that Isaiah does somehow doesn't transfer to the rest of them.
Yeah.
Only the evil transfers.
Yeah.
So what is the evil here? I think we categorize the things that are being protested here, right? One of them is blood guilt. That's the first thing he takes up.
Yeah.
Will you judge the bloody city? That's the ESV version of verse 2.
So that can't be war, though, in the case of Ezekiel.
Well, yeah, is blood guilt is the blood guilt of the bloody city, that is Jerusalem, the blood guilt of war? No, they're allowed to. That's one of the complaints usually made about the Old Testament situation, that God's people are allowed to shed blood.
But they're still described as a bloody city.
So what's the blood that's being shed that God is going to avenge now? It's the blood of the people who dared protest against the abomination.
So
it's
the prophets were regularly killed.
So if you to apply that to today, who are the ones who are persecuting people who dare protest?
Yeah. Do you crush your critics or listen to them?
Yeah, so the blood guilt idea is not about war here. It's about the killing of prophets sent by God who are actually Israelites themselves.
Yeah. So the other thing is they talk about widows and orphans in that passage of Scripture.
Yeah.
And I would have to say that the organization is regularly making widows and orphans.
How so?
Well, I'm an orphan. My parents have nothing to do with me now. So
And
would that not make me an orphan?
And your son is an orphan too because he has no grandparents.
No grandparents.
Yeah.
So this application that is not applied in real terms with the way we are today.
Yeah.
They don't see that. This is unjust treatment of children and grandchildren and parents.
And other family members, siblings, fathers and mothers. You're making, like you're saying, they're making more and more widows and orphans. And that's what we would have to group under social injustice. So he's criticizing them for bloodshed, for social injustice, even down to the family level.
Yeah.
And also in verse 10 for immorality. So you want to make that all about Christendom. Somehow Christendom and the world become almost synonyms in here, don't they?
Yeah.
If the world has a problem with immorality, that's Christendom. They're going to be judged. But do you not realize there's denominations, two of the biggest in the world, that are now breaking up this year over this very issue of what's moral and what's immoral? The Methodists and the Anglicans, very, very large denominations, are being torn apart by this. So it's not as if the protest doesn't go on.
Yeah, but they will be criticized for splitting. See, they can't agree with one another. But if they stay, they're complicit.
Well, that's the
They're
Watchtower.
not standing up to that's what I mean.
Christendom can't win.
Yeah, they can't win. No matter what they do, they're going to be criticized by the organization.
So there are hundreds of millions of Christians right now who are just as eaten up by immorality as you are.
Yeah.
And they're doing something about it.
So was there some comments in there too about money and abuse of stealing people's widows' land and things like that? That's usually
throughout the prophets. In verse 12 in the ESV, in you they take bribes to shed blood. You take interest in profits and make gain of your neighbors by extortion. But me you have forgotten. So in the text, you have forgotten applies to making mammon God, even though mammon hasn't been invented yet. The pursuit of wealth as the highest priority becomes the fourth thing that I see in the groupings here of their collective sins. Mammon being exalted to the role of effectively a god.
And some have been criticizing the organization from switching to being a publishing concern to being a real estate concern. Yeah,
that's a frequent criticism nowadays, that what used to be a publishing empire has now become a real estate empire.
Yeah.
So certainly the organization is condemned from its own mouth.
Yeah,
if these are the standards of God,
they're not blameless, and so I think we should be looking more at God's desire to make us look at ourselves and correct.
And not pointing the finger?
Yeah, rather than criticize others, to individually look at yourself and see if you're guilty in any of these areas, and then clean up and ask God to help you to clean up.
But of course the very fact that you think that the things that we just listed here are worthy of your eternal annihilation, well, Christendom doesn't think like that. The great majority of people in the 10 great denominations of Christendom think God is a God of grace and mercy. You don't. So in that sense, I think you are judged out of by your own standard. By the standard you measure other people by, you will be measured.
Yeah, and when they believe in grace and mercy, that doesn't mean they think it's okay to do wrong things. They fall on the grace and mercy of God, but it's not that they think it's okay.
No, they think that they are sinners. I think that's the great
and
difference
they need
between
grace and mercy.
They think the great difference between us and everybody else is we're all sinners, but Christians are forgiven sinners. You actually think, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, that there is a moral difference between you and everybody else,
and that you can be pure. This whole book is telling you can be pure.
It's a delusion.
Yeah.
What's our link?
The link was JWs identify with Christendom's dissidents, but then they persecute.
Yeah, so there we're thinking of the fact that you'll frequently find references to people like William Tyndale, John Wycliffe, Jan Hus. They've all been mentioned as admirable persons in Christian history who were persecuted by the church. But the truth is they were all Christians within Christendom. They weren't outsiders criticizing Christendom.
Yeah.
But what you're missing, again, you're identifying with the persecuted.
Yeah.
Instead of identifying yourself where you properly are nowadays, which is among the persecutors. No denomination in Christendom has the power to persecute like you do.
Yes.
Or even wants to.
Yeah.
The Catholic Church included. See you next time.